In Activity 3, Size and Color, students first classify and sort paper squares and circles by size and color, and then learn that all members of a group must have a shared property. Students begin to understand that objects can be grouped in many different ways. You will need the following materials from the kit: Activity Sheet 3, sorting trays, circle patterns, blue, red, and yellow construction paper, assorted squares of paper, and a roll of masking tape. You also need to provide property words chart from Activity 2, felt tip marker, a pair of scissors, and a box of crayons. To prepare for the activity, make a copy of Activity Sheet 3 for each student. You will also need copies of the circle patterns sheet to cut out circles from construction paper for a class demonstration. First, group 2 small yellow, 1 small blue, 1 small red, 1 large yellow, 2 large blue, and 3 large red circles together. This group will be referred to as Group 1. Then group 1 small yellow, 2 small blue, 1 small red, 2 large yellow, 1 large blue, and 2 large red circles together, which will be referred to as Group 2. Finally, put a loop of masking tape, sticky side out, on the backs of each of the circles. Next, draw 3 charts on the board. The first chart should have 2 columns labeled large circles and small circles. The second chart should have 2 columns labeled large squares and not large squares. The third chart should have 3 columns labeled red circles, blue circles, and yellow circles. Make sure to create columns wide enough to accommodate the paper shapes you will place in them. On each tray, place 12 paper squares, 1 small, 1 medium, and 1 large of each color, and mix up the squares. Students will sort these squares during the activity. Each team of 2 will need a tray with paper squares and a box of crayons. To begin the activity, select a small and a large yellow circle from Group 1 and hold them up for the class to see. Ask the students, how are these circles alike? How are they different? Students should remark that the circles are the same shape, round, and color, yellow, but that one circle is larger than the other. Place the large circle under the large circles column and the small circle under the small circles column. Introduce the word size to the class as a property that describes how big or small an object is. Ask students, what sense do we use to find out what size something is? The sense of sight or seeing. Next, hold up a large blue circle from Group 1. Ask students, in which group does this circle belong? They should say that the large blue circle belongs in the large group. Place this large circle under the large circles column. Next, hold up the small red circle and ask, does this circle belong in the large or the small group? Students should recognize that the small red circle belongs in the small group. Place this circle under the column marked small circles, and continue the same sorting method for all the remaining circles in Group 1. Then ask students, how many large circles do we have? How many small circles? Students should have 4 small circles and 6 large circles. After the students have properly identified the circles, review the size words on the property words chart and add any new words that the students may have come up with. Explain to the class that when you sort objects, you group them together with other objects of a similar property. In this case, all large circles were put in one group and all small circles were put in another. Next, distribute the sorting trays to the teams and give students time to examine the paper squares, and then ask them to sort the squares by size. Make sure not to specify the number of groups students should create in sorting their squares. When students have finished, ask, how many groups of squares did you make? How many squares are in each of your groups? What words describe the squares in each group? Some teams might make 2 groups of squares, such as small and large, while others might make more, such as small, medium, and large. Encourage students to explain not only why a certain square belongs in one group, but also why the square does not belong in another group. Next, borrow a set of materials from one team for a demonstration. Tell students that they are going to sort the squares into 2 groups, large and not large. Using a loop of masking tape, place a large square on the board under the column large squares and explain that you'll refer to all smaller squares as not large. Stick the smaller square under the column labeled not large squares and elicit student help to place the remaining demonstration squares until they are all sorted. Then ask students, are all the squares in the large squares column the same size? Are all the squares in the not large square column the same size? Students should observe that all the large squares are the same size, but the squares in the not large column are not the same size. Remind students that even though these not large squares are not the same size, they still share the property of not being large. Distribute a copy of Activity Sheet 3 to each student and help students read and answer question 1. Next, hold up a large blue circle, a large red circle, and a large yellow circle from Group 2 and ask students, how are these circles the same? How are they different? Students should observe that all of the circles are the same shape, round, and the same size, but are different colors. Point to the third chart on the board with the columns labeled red circles, blue circles, and yellow circles, and place the circles on the chart accordingly. Explain to the class that you have sorted these 3 circles by color, a property of objects that enables us to visually distinguish them by shade or tint. Continue sorting the paper circles in Group 2 until they're all sorted. There should be 3 red circles, 3 blue circles, and 3 yellow circles. Then ask students, are all the circles in each group the same size? Students should see that each group contains large and small circles, but that all the circles have the same color. Next, ask students to sort the paper squares by color. After they have sorted the paper squares, stimulate a class discussion by asking students questions such as, how many groups of squares did you make? Which group has the most squares? The fewest? What words describe the squares in each group? Accept all classification schemes that students can justify, and guide students to identify schemes such as green and not green, or dark colors and light colors. Finally, have students complete question 2 on their activity sheets and review their responses. To conclude the activity, return all materials to the kit and make sure to leave the property words chart on display in the classroom. For science background, reinforcement activities, curriculum connections, and information about the Delta Science Reader, please consult your DSM Teacher's Guide.